Holy mackerel! Did he jump on that? Hi, I'm Tom White.
And I'm Robin White. Welcome to the world of fly fishing.
I've been fly fishing for over 40 years. Both Rob and I are certified casting instructors by the Federation of Fly Fishers, and we're both on the advisory board for instructor certification. You know, we've taught over 14,000 people how to fly cast, both from beginners, intermediate, advanced, and even to the instructor's degree. We're going to be mixing a little bit of fly fishing in here, a lot of tips and pointers geared toward the beginners all the way through advanced casting. I know I wish I'd have had this video when I was instructing being self-taught. It would have been very useful.
Me too. And you can use the tape to review over and over as you're practicing. It'll be very helpful.
Throughout this series of videos, we're going to be screening new product releases for your information. We will be showing those in detail, but today I'm going to show you some generic things that I take fishing with me. I'll go through them fairly fast just to make you familiar with them. On my left over here we have the fly box. This is something I personally use. All my flies are put in this box and later transferred to smaller boxes as I see which I'm going to be needing for the day. The boxes, for instance, could include, these are your scuds or your shrimp patterns for freshwater. This is the one I actually pack with me. It's got my leader dispenser on the other side. The leaders come out here. But that's my daily box I pack down the lake or the river. Dry flies, all sorts. These are chironomids in particular that I use in the lakes up here. We have your damsel and leech and woolly booger patterns. Another box over here. So what I'll do, I'll transfer from large box to the small box for compactness. Starting down here, a pocket knife. Swiss Army is always the best. It's got a little bit of everything you need, toolkit involved. Lip balm. Line lubricant. Lubricate your line 3 to 4 times a day. This particular brand here has a gun cleaning pad you can actually clean your fly line with. But clean your fly line 3 to 4 times a day. I carry a logbook with me with a waterproof compartment in it. Very useful for information on temperature, insects, etc. A good reference for future dates. Number one thing in your bag is insect repellent. Carry a thermometer with you. It's good to find out what the water temperature is, both streams and lakes. You'll find out they coincide a lot with your hatches. Tie a lanyard on it so you won't lose it. The net should be with a soft mesh, no nylon, a soft cotton mesh, so when you catch and release fish, it doesn't remove the slime or the scales and injure the fish. I prefer wood because it floats. This morning, I went out just off the dock in a lake here with my net. Before I start on any river or lake, I kick a lot of insects up, and I've collected a few of these insects right now. There's the big dragon, very close. I never even got my feet wet when I collected all these insects. Carry these vials with you. Down here, I've got mayflies, I've got scuds, back swimmers, and you get used to the color of these insects. Colors are very important. See what stage of maturity they are, if they're coming off or not. Another thing about this net, carry this in a float tube or boat with you, so if you see insects coming off, you scoop them up, throw them in a vial, put them in water, and you can tell the color and size. Very, very important. Down here, the most useful tool you'll have on your vest, everybody should have a pair of hemostats. And the hemostats are used for several things. Most obvious is crimping your barbs down. Number 2 is in releasing fish. If you have one hooked deep, you can reach down and pull it out without injuring the fish. Clip it back on your vest or whatever when you're through. It's kind of there all the time. I've got a hook sharpener on a lanyard. Can be a lot of different types from ceramic stones. This particular one is steel. We're attached to my vest. I carry a little tube here. Your licenses should be kept in a waterproof container. This particular one here is made, it hangs on a chain. I've got from Alaska to Canada all the way through. All my licenses are stuffed in this, and they stay waterproof. It always stays with you, so the law enforcement people can't get after you. A good flashlight, small and compact, get caught after dark, good for SOS safety or whatever. A flashlight's very essential. Now, over here we have your tippet dispensers. In other words, you could buy pre-tied leaders that are tapered all the way down, but during the day, what you're going to be doing is breaking the small portions off. You're getting wind knots in them. You need to change your fly. So the 4-pound test suddenly turns into 8-pound test. Well, you need tippet dispensers. I like this one in particular because they have the nylon straps here with the holes coming out so you can grab it, and it really minds your leader very well. And I've got from 3X all the way up to including 7X tippets. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on one handy spool. I recommend this type here. Tough leader, exact on line breaking, and it also is very compact and doesn't get messed up. Polaroid sunglasses are extremely, extremely important in fishing. 2 colors. They have the brown or amber here, and they also have the green. The brown seems to be most popular in freshwater, and you get in saltwater, you may be jockeying between the amber and the dark green. Strike indicators, some people call it bobber fishing. There's several types out. This is just like a corky that people use. In other words, if you want to gauge the depth in a stream or in a lake, you can put a toothpick in this one, or these type here, twist on your line so you can gauge depth with that. Rubber bands are something you can't have enough of in your arsenal because you need to tie rods together. It's the most useful tool you'll ever have on a fishing trip, no matter where you're fishing. What I do also, I left these insects alive this morning so you can see the natural color. You can see them wiggle for the camera. But there's some embalming fluid that you can buy now. I carry a lot of different vials with me when I'm freshwater stream or lake fishing because you can't have enough insects with you. And with good embalming fluid, you can preserve the color. Now, if you use straight water, in about 3 or 4 days, these will turn to mush without embalming fluid. If you ever happen to use formaldehyde, use 1 part formaldehyde, 9 parts water. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff on the table here for one particular type of fishing. What I do, I take a checklist that's printed. I added some more things to it. Follow this checklist before you go fishing. It'll stop you from ruining a trip. As you will see in this program, we're going to be using 4 methods of fly casting and fly fishing and fly teaching. We're going to be number 1, we're going to be on some grass like you'll be at home. We'll be on the dock to show you some ideal conditions. Sometimes we'll be in a boat, and sometimes we'll be in a float tube. A good way to get started on fly casting is first secure your reel to the rod. Most people have a tendency to take the end of their leader and shove it up through the guides. I'll show you a better way. What you do is you find your fly line, go back about 1 foot. What we're going to do is put a little wedge in your fly line. We're going to put a wedge like this, and what we're going to do is run the wedge up through the guides. If you happen to drop it and let go, they don't slide all the way back down. It's much faster also than running just the tip section of your leader up. Now, lower your rod on the ground. Be careful not to put it in sand or gravel because it'll ruin a whole fishing trip. Again, just running the wedge up the rod. As you can see, it goes quite fast. And I've got a 9.5 foot rod, so it takes a little bit longer to thread it. So double your line over 1 foot from your leader. Leave it hanging out. Then what I do is I pick up the rod. There's no fly on it. I give a short, crisp kick like that. Now I've got my leader in my hand. I'm ready to attach my fly and go fishing. Okay, let's get started fly casting. We're going to lay about 10 feet of line beyond our rod tip. We're going to strip some line off our reel, maybe about 20 feet, lay it on the deck. We're going to loosely hold our line so it can slip out with our left hand. Watching off the tip of my rod, I'm going to zigzag the rod tip like this, not real vigorously. This extra line goes out in a pile at the end of a rod tip. Now we're going to use what we call a roll cast to extend our line out to get started. Now the roll cast, we're going to trap our line. Always trap the line with your right hand. Either have it firmly in your left hand or trap the line this way. Never let it work off the reel freely. So we'll trap our line with our right hand index finger. Now we're going to show you how to do a roll cast. The first thing to remember in a roll cast is have patience. Things happen very fast with that rod tip, so let's do things very slowly to learn how to do it. We have our slack in our line now. We use a roll cast as a method of getting the slack out of our line. The first thing we do with a rod, we want to tip it to the side. Just tip the rod plane to the side. This avoids the line coming back hitting you in the head. Now, we're going to bring our rod back. Our wrist is open. This is called open. This is called closed. The closing of your wrist at the end is what causes the rod to release the loop and cause the roll cast to initiate. Now, we elevate our arm up, rod tip to the side. We're tipped back about 30 degrees, and we want to stop, let the fly line settle in the water. You need the friction of the water to allow the roll cast to project your line out. Now, from this position, we want to drive the butt of the rod down about 45 degrees without closing our wrist. Drive the butt of the rod down at the last moment. We'll just close our wrist and point our thumb straight forward. Remember now, on a roll cast is patience. Do not bring the line back too fast. If you bring it back too fast, here's what happens. You'll bring it back and you'll dump line all over. The key word is drag. Drag the line back. I'm opening my wrist as I do this. At this point, the rod tip is aside. I'm stopped. The friction is grasping the fly line. Now, slowly, we'll go down. At the end, we'll push forward with our thumb, extending the roll cast out. Rod to the side, bring it back to a stop position. Hesitate a moment. I say, have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Stop. Go forward. Throw your thumb down. Now, here's the incorrect way to do it. Most people have a tendency to rotate their wrist closed as they start, like this. Now, if you look at my loop out there, you'll see a big doming loop caused by an early closure. If you start getting that doming loop, that means you're kind of closing your wrist with no authority too early. What you want to do is drive it down and punch. If you want a low roll cast, I want to close my wrist at the end. A high roll cast, now if the wind happened to be behind you, then we can close it sharply when you start down. Sharply and point the rod tip higher, lifts the line off the water. Close it early with authority. Go forward, a real severe punch at the end. A real severe punch at the end. Okay, now we're on the grass similar to your backyard. And a roll cast on water, like I say, you need the surface tension of water to be able to extend a roll cast. Let me show you what happens over here when you try to do a roll cast on grass. I'll have the line out like this. Even though I've come back and stopped, as I go forward, you see how that line snaps? I'll bring it back to a stop. Even though I've stopped, there's nothing to grasp it. So don't get disconcerted when you're on your lawn trying to practice your roll cast. You need the surface tension of water. Okay, we've showed you how to cast under ideal conditions. Now we're out here in a nice lake in British Columbia. I want to put some of those ideas that we had into practical application. Now, for safety's sake, I want to put my sunglasses on because there's a good chance of getting a line burn or a hook burn across your eye. And I'll have to keep maneuvering my float tube here to stay in vision for you. First, you take the fly off the hook keeper, lay your fly in the water, and this is what gets most beginners. How do you get started? Remember that zigzag? We'll slip some line off the reel. We'll cause the mess to be in front of us. Pile the line out. Now we'll come back to the roll cast, bring it back to a stop, go forward. It's a good way to get started. Okay, we have a little line out behind us, but there are a lot of people who are hesitant about casting because there may be two people in the boat. Another way to do this is zigzag the line out like this and merely paddle away or roll away and get your line straightened out like that. Especially useful if you have sinking lines. It's a good way to get started. If you're in a crowded boat, it's sure a lot safer. Okay, we've showed you how to zigzag cast to get the slack in the water in front of you. And we did the roll cast. Remember, the roll cast to straighten your line out, get it laying out on the water. That's in preparation for picking your cast up. Now here's what most beginners do when they want to bring the line out the water. They want to shock it and charge it. Now watch all these extra bubbles out here. They want to charge back. Again, they want to lift real violently. There's a lot of surface tension out there. It shocks your rod, takes a lot of energy, very inefficient. Now watch this cast. Lift, The only thing left on the water when I make my stop is the fly. Lift and then stop. Remember now, you want to lift your rod, and you'll be lifting the line off the water, and you stop when the fly is left in the water. Watch. Lift, stop. Go forward, drop. Lift, stop, go forward, drop. Very efficient cast, takes a lot less energy. Well, it's starting to look pretty easy, isn't it? Actually, it really is once you learn to do it efficiently and in the correct way. I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask my wife to come over, and maybe she can give you her views on how to do the same things and give you a little bit different twist on teaching techniques. This way I get a chance to go do some fishing while she's doing the demos.
Let's take a couple of minutes to review what Tom's gone over. Remember, we're out here in a fishing situation. We want to get the slack out of our line, so we do that by doing a roll cast. Now we've got the slack out, we're going to do a pickup cast. Slowly bring your line back. When your fly starts moving, just flick your hand back. You're up in the air. You can go into a couple of false casts, place your line exactly where you want it, and now you're fishing. See, girls, this is easy. You don't have to have muscles to fly fish. You just need the opportunity to get out and practice. Once you do, it's easy and it's fun.
We've been casting for a while now, but there's certain things you need to know to get started. For instance, how do you attach your monofilament leader to your fly line? How do you tie certain knots? Take a couple of moments here. We'll show you how to do that without a lot of effort. In our research for new products, I think here's one that you'd be real tickled with. I do a lot of fly fishing schools. Now these are fly casting only. They last for 4 hours. There's a lot of things we have to cover in that school. I want to cover casting only. A lot of people say, well, how do I tie these knots? Now, believe me, in 4 hours, you could not learn the 3 essential knots with 12 people. So I developed a knot tying tool I think you'd be real tickled with. And if you look at it down here, I'll show you the essential ingredients. Basically, it has a little needle in the top here, and that helps you gouge out the head cement on the flies. If you try to get those 22s threaded through, you find that's pretty tough, especially on a new fly. On the other end over here, we have a set of stainless steel nippers where you can nip your monofilament line off very flush. The real trick in the tool here is all in one. It's a folding arm. This has your knot tying tool on it. There are 3 essential knots that you should know to fly fish, excluding the Bimini twist. The first thing you have to do is attach your monofilament to your fly line. That's using a nail knot. The second thing you have to do continually during the day, you have to splice your tip section, which is the smallest part of your leader, on because you're constantly shortening it, or that's the part that gets the knots in it. And the third knot you need to know is how do you attach your monofilament to your fly. The nip and knot does all 3 knots, and I'm going to show you how to use it. Okay, the first knot we're going to tie is a nail knot. We're going to attach the butt section of our leader to our fly line. I've chosen fluorescent line for demonstration purpose for the camera. We'll swing the blade of our tool out, put our thumb in here. We'll place the fly line up the slot like this, 5 or 6 inches out over the fork. The fork will pull down on this little fork of the tool. I'll try to keep it stable here. And then wrap up the shank 5 to 6 times. Clamp it with your index finger. Always pass the line away and underneath the loops that you've made. Like this, down, and you hold it. Now you've trapped the knot. This is in preparation for inserting your fly line inside that loop that you've made with the tool. Now if you see now I have the fly line going underneath. I will grab the loose end of the leader, and I'm going to pull sharply, just pull it. You'll see how that's cinching in. I will drop the tool now. Here's what our knot looks like. Now it's not cinched into that PVC coating on our fly line, so I'll take both ends, snug a little bit. Now grab the fly line on one finger, this on the other, and slowly pull it, and you'll see how it cinches into the fly line. There's a PVC coating over braided Dacron on your fly line, and that's cinched in. I'll take the clippers and I'll clip it firmly, very close. Now I'll reverse the end, and I will be clipping the fly line. I'll show you here. Be clipping the fly line off very closely. All right. Now at that point, you have a nice, clean, neat knot. There's less chance of hanging up on the knot, better than the loop. There's less drag than those loop-to-loop portions you see on a lot of fly lines. Very, very strong. It's good up to about 15-pound test. Tip it. It'll give you a clean knot, easy to tie. Okay, the next knot of 3, the second we're going to tie, we're going to be able to splice our tip sections on. Now, if you take a leader, here's the fly line, we've tied the nail knot on. Leaders are somewhat, say, 7 to 9 feet in length. And this particular one is a pre-tied 9-foot leader that smooth tapers down to 4.4-pound test line. Now, for demonstration purposes only, we're again going to use the white line for the camera. But normally now you would take a tip section, pick out 4.4-pound test, take it off your reel, and splice that on the small part of your leader. So what we're doing now, we're going to take our butt section down about 7 feet or wherever it starts to break off, and we're going to take another piece of tip section, 4.4-pound test, and attach 2 pieces of monofilament together using called a uni knot, or putting a nail knot around this line, this nail knot around the other line, and pull them together. Now let me show you how to do that. We take our nail knot tool, the nipping knot. We will take our butt section of our leader down toward the end here. We will wrap it around again, up the slot, keeping your index finger free, about 4 inches free, wrap up the shank. Now, for splicing lines together, you only go 3 wraps, period. Only 3. Trap it. Now we take the loose end, the same as your other nail knot, and we're going to pass it away from us, pass it underneath the slot you've made, pull it down like this, and stop it. Now, we're going to take our tip section, our tippet material, in this particular case, the white piece again for camera purposes. We're going to insert that underneath and through this slot. We'll pass it underneath, trap it with your thumb. Now grab this loose end here. Now I'm going to pull this off on top of the other piece of monofilament. Now, what we have here, we have a nail knot around one piece of monofilament. I'm going to reverse the process. I'm going to turn them over, and I'm going to repeat the process now with a small section here. We'll take the tool again. We'll lay the 2 pieces of line in the slot here. I'll take your loose end right here. I'm going to wrap that 3 times up the shank only. Up the shank 3 times. Now, with the loose end again, we always pass the loose end away from us underneath the tunnel, and I'm going to pull that knot off. You'll be able to see it better now. What we have here is we have a nail knot over each end of the line. The trick here you should usually do is you wet this portion here. You always wet your knots, and I will probably lick that, but I will just start slowly pulling them together. Slowly pulling these together. Don't pull hard. Now, watch that knot as I start firmly pulling now. The knot turns over. At that point, you have a 98 to 99% knot. It's 30% stronger than a blood knot. And if you'll notice when I get finished with it here, it's one of the cleanest little splices going, and far less chance on getting wind knots in your leader, having your fly tangled up. But it's one of the most efficient ways I've ever seen to attach 2 pieces of monofilament. Again, if you follow the leader back here to the left, we're going to have our nail knot, fly line to butt section, and about 7 to 8 feet down here on our tip section, we've spliced our small portion back on. This is something you'll be doing 5 to 6 to 7 times a day. Know this knot. This is the one that catches you a lot of fish, and you're going to be messing with it. Practice it at home. It'll save you a lot of headaches. Okay, now I'll show you how to attach the fly to the tip section, or the smallest part of your leader. If you look down here, what we've done so far, we've attached from the fly line, we've attached the nail knot, following our leader down. We've attached 2 pieces of monofilament together, called the tip section, down to how to attach the fly. I've already threaded the line through the eye of the fly to better explain it to you. Now we'll take this line. What I'm going to do for this knot is actually wrap a nail knot around this line and cinch it tight. And the way we do that, we take our line that's already threaded, lay the tool out like this, lay both lines in the slot. You see the free end over here. We're going to take the free end, we made a loop around. Now we're going to start tying a nail knot around your monofilament, wrapping up the shank as we explained to it before. About 4 times is sufficient. Again, trapping the line, passing the loose end away from you, up the tunnel that we've made. Grasp the line. Now all I'm going to do is just pull this tight immediately. Pull it, you pull it off. Now if you look at the knot before we cinch it tight, what we have here is we have a nail knot around our fly line. We'll dampen it and merely pull it up toward the fly. Now, the reason I like to use this particular knot, if you'll notice very closely here, I haven't cinched it all the way down. There are cases sometimes where you need the fly to dangle. Now, you don't want the knot real tight, especially with heavily weighted flies, because the knot might be off the side and the fly will track sideways. Now, if you'll notice, I will cut this leader fairly close right here to the knot. Now when a fish strikes, this will actually cinch down real snug. You can take your fingernails down to the fly and you can loosen it back up to where it's dangling again. When a fish hits, it'll strike, it'll come up tight, and you keep loosening this knot from this angle without interrupting the integrity of the knot. In reviewing, 3 knots you have to know: attach your butt section, your biggest part of your leader, to your fly line, following it down 9, 10 to 12 feet, attach the next section called a uni knot, attaching 2 pieces of mono, and finally the last knot you need to know is how to attach the fly to the tip section. Using the nipple knot, I think a real handy tool, takes about 10 minutes to learn to use. I think that's one of the greatest innovations in fly fishing in a long time. Practice, practice, practice. That's what makes it happen. 90% of your practicing is done, should be done at least, near your house. Pick a spot where you have a nice wide open spaces, preferably a lawn, some grass in your driveway, and keep your rod strung up. Take a piece of practice fly line, leave it on, you're more apt to pick it up. If you have to take it out of the bag, the tube, string it up, guarantee you won't practice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a lawn over here, some nice open grass, and we're going to practice some of this fly casting. We went through several thousand people teaching the art of fly casting, from beginners all the way through advanced into instructor's degree. The best way we found to teach, we start them off casting sidearm for 2 reasons. If you learn to cast overhand, most people have a tendency to have a restricted back cast. This way, if you learn sidearm to start with, what you can do, you hold your rod like this, either thumb on top or sidearm like you're hammering a nail. I don't prefer the pinky on top because it gives you very little strength. So choose the grip you want. Rotate your rod sideways. We don't want to favor this cast or this cast. We want to give it equal credence between your back cast and your front cast. Now you can see that I'm just like watching a tennis match. I'm watching both courts here. If you learn to do it overhand, you have a real rough time looking back, and consequently you don't get the right angle on your back cast. I'm making an equal distribution between my back and my front cast. This way I'm casting parallel to my body. So if you drew a graph out here, this would be your quote-unquote 12 o'clock. I'm drawing about 45-degree angles for parallel casting for the amount of line out. We're just showing you a method of practicing. As you get onto this, you get the casting stroke down like this, then you can go ahead and raise it overhand. So it's the same thing overhand as it is sidearm, except this way you get used to watching your back cast. Watch my wrist. I'm going back and stopping. There's just about this much wrist right at the end. Just stop, stop. I like to have people take their rod like this, grasp their line, go forward and go whop. See that rod goes stop? That's how much vibration it is on stopping the rod. A steady increase in speed with a sudden stop. Stop. Now notice my finger is not going dipping down real far at the end. What we're doing is coming back and stopping and stopping. We're forming the loop. An abrupt stop at the end forms the loop. Now, what shapes your loop wide? What shapes your loop narrow? Follow my finger. If I go forward like this, my fly line is tracking my finger. I come like this. If I make my abrupt stop right here, what's happening at the end, I'm dipping down a little bit to that 45. The line sails overhead. So I'm going forward at the end. I'm kicking down a little bit. Now, the further you stop your thumb at the end, the wider your loops are. Kick your thumb over at the end. What's happening, the line is tracking here. You stop. The line still tracks overhead, but you're coming down here. You're getting out of the way. This is the width of your loop. Now observe this on my back cast back here. We'll have you swing over here. I'm going to come back and stop and stop. Now I'm stopping. I'm dipping down a little bit. Now if I stop down all the way, see what happens? Here's a wide loop. Now if I stop sooner, it's a narrow loop. Soon's a narrow loop. Wide loop by dipping down. Narrow loop. Wide loop. Now watch my finger again. I'm holding my finger up like this. Here's a wide loop. Here's a narrow loop. Going back, here's a narrow loop. Here's a wide loop. So you must stop at the end to form the loop, but where you stop your thumb and your wrist like that determines the width of your loop. We're going to be moving into a float tube for our next section. Let's take it a float tube. Basically, they start off with a round inner tube, but they've modified it a long ways. They're U-shaped now, much easier to get in and out of. They weigh less than 5 pounds now. I'll tell you, it makes a difference between going fishing sometime and not going fishing. It's hard to get a boat into. You have the option of having the float tube with you. You're wearing neoprene waders, 3 millimeter, 5 millimeter. You stay very warm, you stay very dry. The float tube is a little bit lower platform. In other words, a lot of people have a little rough time at first combating the fact that you're sitting low to the ground, but now with the longer rods out, say 9 foot at least, up to 10-foot rods, new fly casting techniques, you'll find out that the float tube can be a very, very good friend of yours. Let's go into the float tube a little bit. We'll show you how to combat that by forming some real good loops. The difference between a beginner caster and an intermediate caster is the realization that you're making 2 casting strokes. So when you're watching me here, I want to be casting with a back cast, I'm going to be casting with a front cast. But each cast will have that figure J that's laid on its side. Now what I'm going to do, the loop is formed by an abrupt stopping of the butt of the rod at the end of each casting stroke. We're making one behind us and one forward. Now I'm going to turn around and show you what I'm talking about on a front cast. Make a cast behind me. I'll spin around. Now watch my rod abruptly stop. 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 You see that little figure J at the end out there? That's called a loop. Here's a wide loop. Here's a narrow loop. And a wide loop. And a narrow loop. Those loops are caused, remember, by an abrupt stopping of the butt of the rod on your front cast as well as your back cast. Forming the loop. Let's look at it from a different angle. Okay, now we're going to show you the loop control on my front cast. I'm going to throw you some wide and narrow loops. Here's a fairly narrow loop and a little bit wider loop. A narrower loop. Now watch where my rod is stopping on each cast. Here's a real wide one. You notice how I sweep it out. If I stop sooner, it gets narrower yet. Fairly narrow loop, fairly narrow loop, much wider loop, much wider loop, a little bit narrower loop, wider loop, narrow loop, and wider loop. Now if I stop too soon, we get that proverbial wind out or tailing loop, right? So you have to kick your thumb forward at the end of your cast to control your loop size. Okay, now watch my hand. As I go forward, if I stop my rod right here, I have a very, very narrow loop. If I stop my rod right here, it gets wider. If I stop my rod right here, it gets wider yet. This is the same thing on the back cast. Narrow, wider, and wider yet. Okay, I'm going to show you the same thing in reverse. We're going to pay attention to our back cast. Sounds familiar, I know. As we come back, we're going to have a narrow loop on our back cast, a wider loop on our back cast, and a much wider loop yet on our back cast. So observe this. You stop, narrow loop, wider loop yet, wider loop yet, much narrower loop, much wider loop, much narrower loop, and a wider loop. Know how to manage your loops, because if you're using long leaders, you may need a wide loop. If you're throwing heavily weighted flies, a wider loop. If you throw it too narrow, your line comes and tangles up on itself. So manage your loops, and that'll get you a lot of fish, be able to combat wind conditions also. The next thing we need to do is show you how to handle more fly line to make those longer casts. Now we know how to throw a loop by what? By abruptly stopping your rod on your front and your back cast. We know how to vary the size of our loop by where we stop the angle at each end. Now what I want to do is watch my hand. I'm going to pull off another 6 feet of line here, but I'm going to start throwing about 25 feet of fly line. Watch my stroke with my hand here. It's very little stroke, like throwing the baseball to the pitcher. It doesn't take very much stroke at all, does it? Now, what I'm going to do is let a little more line out. Watch my hand, let a little more line out. You notice I have to hesitate longer between casts. And now my casting stroke is much longer. My hand is traveling much longer. I'm not doing this, right? My hand is traveling backward and forth, right? I'm still throwing the same size loop by stopping my thumb at the same angle, but my casting stroke has to get longer with the more line out. A good exercise you can do while viewing this is join in with me. At trade shows, I have all the audience moving their hand like this. They're feeling that line. They're feeling what that rod stoplights. They're feeling that rod go further and further back. I want you to join in a little pantomime. As you're doing this, you'll get to feel it before you pick up a fly rod. Now, we just showed you how to throw more fly line in the air. We're going to teach you how to pay more line out beyond the rod tip so you can make those longer casts. Now we're going to be working with about a 30-foot cast. What we need to do is what we call pay line out. Now I want you to focus mainly on my left hand. What I'm going to be doing is bringing my rod back to a stop, go forward to a stop, and then slipping some line and then holding securely. Never let two casts go at one time. Watch my left hand. I'm in control first. Slip some line, grasp it. I'm holding very securely. Stop, slip some line. Get control of the loop, stop, slip some line. I'm in control, stop, grasp it, holding very securely, stop, slip some more line. Now I'm in control, slip or shoot some line, stop, shoot a little bit more line. Now I'm ready for my final cast. That's what you need to do to slip line out. Do not hold any more in the air than you can control. Get control of each loop before you slip some more line out. Remember, you need to get enough fly line beyond the tip of your rod to load your rod. We just showed you how to what we call pay line out or extend your fly line beyond the tip. Now you're ready to do what we call shooting fly line. Now, I always say that most of my students, for some reason, if they want to make a 40-foot cast, they keep letting line out and getting 90 feet in the air to throw 40 feet. Well, it's really just the opposite. You only need about 30 feet of line in the air to throw 90 feet, and that's called shooting line. Now watch my left hand. I'm securely grasping my line. The first thing I'm doing here in making a cast, I want to be shooting line on my back cast. I'm holding securely with my left hand. I'm choosing the loop size that I want for my final cast. In other words, I don't want this one for throwing distances. I don't want to throw a wide loop like that. I want to throw a loop about that size. You see where my rod stops on the horizon? That's where I stop, right there. That's the loop I want. Now, next time when I come back, I'm going to stop and then let go of the line. Stop. You see where my rod stays? That's where I selected my loop on my practice cast. Stick it and stay with it. Watch again. I'll pull the line in here. I want to shoot this additional 10 feet of line. I will get control of my loop. I will choose my loop. And then I will stop where I chose it, leave it there. Then you can drop it later. Once you make a stop with your rod, your loop is formed. You cannot reform that loop, make it any better. You can mess your line up. In other words, you can stop here and then lower it, but I don't want people doing this. For some reason, we all have a tendency to do this. On our final cast, we're looking good here. We want to go like that and really give it, I call it going for the gold. It does nothing but make up your cast. How would it look on your practice cast if you went like this? It wouldn't look, don't make your final cast like that. Make your final cast. We've stopped. Don't give your last cast any more effort than you gave your practice cast. And then you can lower your rod down when your loop hits the end. We're going to move back to the dock now and do a little review on shooting line. We want to shoot line, all right? To shoot line, the first thing you do is enough line beyond the tip of your rod. Get enough fly line beyond the tip of your rod. We want to choose the loop we want. We want to stop a rod on the horizon where we chose a loop. We want to release the line, leave your rod there. Do not put extra energy into your final cast like this. We chose that loop, it looked good. Don't do this. Go for the gold. Stop on your final cast, stop, shoot line, then lower your rod down after you stopped your rod. Trajectory, our next topic. All it means is basically the casting plane where your fly line is going high in the back, low in the front. You've heard a lot of old adages about old clocks. What we're going to be doing is moving our casting plane to different levels depending on how far your target is out. Remember, trajectory. Follow along with me. Get to feel this high back, low front cast. This will prevent a lot of problems as you advance in fly casting. For this demonstration, I'm going to be in a boat so you can see exactly what I'm doing here from a standing position. We're going to talk about trajectory or the plane of your cast. For instance, if I'm casting high back, low front like this, my rod is going to be in this angle. I'm aiming right downhill at my target. So this is great for short targets. What you're doing all the time, you're aiming right down to your target. See that little splash I'm making for demonstration? There's my target. Now I would aim in practicality a little bit beyond that target and with enough power to go beyond it so when I stop, then the fly drops on the water. Don't drill the fly into the water when you make a cast. Aim with enough power to go beyond it and aim a little bit above it. Now, I have a high back, low front cast for short distances because virtually what I'm doing is I'm aiming uphill and downhill at my target, aiming a little bit above. This is the middle of my casting stroke. So I'm stopping here, going down, aiming a little bit above my target. As my target moves further out, I keep pointing my rod or my casting plane toward my target. It gets flatter. As I get further out yet on the target, it gets more toward a flat plane. To the furthest extent, it's similar to a baseball player standing in center field trying to throw to home plate. He has to throw in a casting plane like this, real similar. So the middle of your casting stroke on the longest is right in here. Now let me demonstrate this to you. Casting plane, trajectory, all right? Now what I'm going to do is choose the trajectory that I want. Trajectory meaning I don't want to throw high. I don't want to throw real low. So I throw about this angle. See where my rod stops on the horizon? There's a loop that I chose for my final cast. Now I'm aiming above my target with enough power to go beyond my target. Now as my target gets further out, you notice I have a little less high in the back, more toward the down. I'm lower front, higher back. Now as I extend the line way out, watch this now. It almost takes a flat casting plane to be able to cast distances like that. Stop it, bang, and drop it. So my casting plane went from here for short distances to here for a little bit longer to here for a long distance cast around 70, 80 feet. Understand trajectory, it's very important. It'll prevent those tailing loops that you normally have. See, roll casting now, right? Stopping that wrist, getting those loops wide, getting them tight, trajectory, casting plane, starting to feel a little bit of it, starting to feel better with that pantomime. I'll show you how I use some of these things that we've just learned. Come on with me, let's go catch some fish. Ah, I like this. There's some fish working over there next to that reed bed. You notice I have to pull this sinking line, a full sinking line up the top using the roll cast. There's a good cast. Right off the drop off. Now I'll count to about 25 and see how we do. Then we move her down here a little bit, and I know I can get one down this corner. Okay, I'll start working it up now using short strips. Notice my tip is underwater, so I got a very tight line pulling in toward the fish. Kind of working this kind of a leech pattern, real short, crisp strips. They seem to like a fast retrieve. Coming toward the top, that's when they take it as it's coming up. I tell you, when they hit it like a ton of bricks too. Okay, got another cast over there. A lot of fish cruise right next to that bank over there. Working around. See how maneuverable these float tubes are? You're laid back, perfectly relaxed. They're very maneuverable too. You can spin them in a circle. Okay, stripping some more line in here. Wind's died down, makes it a lot easier out here. Notice the line's draped over the fingers there. Okay, I'm going to use a backhanded cast here. Okay, all you do is you cast this way and end up making your cast right down there. Just as accurate. I'll spin around here. There we go. Let the line sink down to the depth you want. There he is. Got it. I'm going to have to paddle back and get the slack out. Yeah, that fly just settled. Just settled down. First thing you do, you swap hands, get on the reel. Oh, look at that go, will ya? Man. Holy mackerel. Now I'm applying a little bit of drag with my fingers here in addition to the reel. I like to keep the reel just tight enough to prevent a backlash when they run. And you can pinch off a little line here for additional drag. So we've got track shoes on. There we go. About a 2.5, 3 pounder. There he goes. Using barbless hooks, so it makes it a lot easier to get them out. You can catch and release the fish up here. I don't even use a net in float tube anymore because this U-shaped boat, you can float them right in your lap. They're suspended in water. You can take the hook out with ease without knocking the scales off. Boy, I sure like to be working today in a nice office. Oh, it is so much fun. Hopefully lead him into my belly. Okay. Take the hemostats. She took it a little bit deep. Nice thing about these hemostats to be able to reach down there and take the hook off, and she's gone. I enjoyed that. A little information, a little fishing, great scenery. I'll tell you, I have really enjoyed this part one. On part two, we're going to work on some more double hauling, the dreaded double haul, how to show you do a 80, 90 foot roll cast, how to extend your casting distance with a lot more tricks involved. Remember, limit your kill. You don't have to kill your limit. Enjoy the sport of fly fishing. Go barbless whenever possible. It's easier to release fish. I found out that I've lost very, very few fish from tarpon fishing all the way up through Alaska by using a barbless hook. Enjoy the sport, practice whenever possible, and we really appreciate your viewing this program.